to find out about what's going on in government and in your community and keep folks at City Hall honest. This month we're going to be talking about the environment, how to use open government laws and public information to find out about environmental issues in your community. So we appreciate you coming today. This is our fall episode. Uh, Leaves turning brown all across the country and turning into beautiful colors. We don't get to see a whole lot of that here in Houston where we are. Uh, we don't see a whole lot of seasons change down here. I think we have about 2 seasons, summer and Groundhog Day basically. But for those of you who can see the leaves turn, I'm sure it's lovely. And we're going to talk a little bit about the great outdoors and how you can find out about what's going on in the air, the water, and what's been put in the ground in your community. First of all, let me tell you that we want to hear from you and ask your questions and get answers. So please feel free to chat with us live. If you're watching through newmediatv.org, you can use the chat function that's embedded in the web page to send us your questions. We'll take your questions and try to get you the best answer we can. You can also chat with us via Twitter. We are at Texas Watchdog, all one word, on Twitter, so please follow us. You're welcome to send us questions and comments that way, and we'll try to talk back to you here on the show. Keep in mind we also have a special hashtag. If you know what hashtags are on Twitter, that's a little keyword with a pound sign in front of it. That's hashtag TrentTV. And we are coming to you live here on the inner tubes. We appreciate you coming. If you have to step away from the computer for a minute during our broadcast, don't worry about that, because we'll be up on YouTube in just a little bit after the show ends, within a couple days, and we'll if you follow us on Facebook or on Twitter, we'll update everybody to let them know where you can go to YouTube and see the full episode. You can also tell all of your friends about us, and they can watch us on YouTube and see all the archived video there, and also on newmediatv.org. We'll tell you a little bit about our topic of the environment today. First of all, this is something we do for every show. We just want to make sure everybody understands that public records are a great thing for us to have and to know about. But the catch is that public records laws, open records laws, vary from state to state. And there are 50 states. Something that is public in your state may not be public here in Texas where I live. Or people in Texas may be able to access a certain record or type of record here under the Public Information Act, as it's called, that you may not be able to get access to in your state. We want to give you some resources for how you can find out about what the public records law in your state says. There are 2 very good, thorough websites that you can go to. One is the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press. They're based in Washington, D.C. They have an excellent site with all kind of information about government transparency and freedom of information. And they have a guide in their site that gives you links to where you can go to find out more about the public records laws in all 50 states. It's very handy. Another very good site for you to check out is the Marion Breckner Citizen Access Project. Their site, I believe, is hosted at the University of Florida. They also have a guide that gives you information about public records laws in all 50 states and links to how you can find out more detailed information if you need it. They also have a very useful comparison of the strengths and weaknesses of each state's law. So those are good to have. That's something to keep in mind as we talk today a little bit about using open government laws. It'd be hard for us to talk about what the laws are in all 50 states, so we have to kind of summarize a little bit. But we welcome your questions, and if we don't know the answers ourselves, we'll try to find somebody who can help you. Because of the specialized nature of our topic today, the environment, I want to make the same disclaimer about environmental laws. You know, environmental laws do vary from state to state. There are important federal laws on the books, such as the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And generally speaking, federal laws, you know, they say the same thing for all 50 states. But the states have the ability to impose more strict laws than for the federal standard if they want to. What might be legal for me to dump out in my backyard here in Texas may be illegal for you to dump out in your backyard if you live in Montana or Connecticut or Florida or some other state. So it's a little hard to get a handle on exactly what's illegal and not legal. But we'll tell you about the basics of open government, using open records, and how you can get some questions answered and find out more about what the law says and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So first, let's talk. Let's structure our talk today in two major areas. The first one is going to be about looking at very serious environmental issues where you can find a lot of information easily on the web from the comfort of your own home. And after we talk about them, we'll come back and we'll talk about investigating maybe more localized problems in your community. For example, if you have sewage spills that keep recurring in a creek in your neighborhood, things like that, where you may have to go out and do your own original research using open government laws. So first of all, we'll talk about how to use the web to find out about some of the most serious environmental issues in your community. And we'll start with the big kahuna of environmental laws. We'll start with Superfund. Now, if you've heard the term Superfund and you don't know what it is, here's a little explainer. Basically, it's the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, and it was passed in 1980. The acronym, of course, so many things in government have acronyms. I think it's pronounced CERCLA, but people call it Superfund. The idea is that people in government realized that there are all these places all across the United States, largely industrial sites, maybe not all of them, but most of them, where really serious chemicals and pollutants have been put in the environment. And over time, for various reasons, it has become hard to track down exactly who's responsible, or basically find the responsible parties and force them to pay to get all this crud cleaned up. The case that comes to my mind when we talk about Superfund is Love Canal. This was the situation up in New York State, I think up around Niagara Falls, in the very late 70s, when they determined that subdivision, some affordable housing, I think a school, was built on top of a dump for very serious chemicals that caused cancer and birth defects. And basically the whole place had to be just wiped clean, demolished. People had to be evacuated. The children were born with birth defects and serious health problems. Love Canal was really a problem. And Congress realized somebody's got to be able to pay for this stuff, and sometimes it's really, really, really expensive. And in a lot of these cases, these are industrial sites where the company that ran that plant or that factory maybe went out of business years ago. Maybe their owners went bankrupt. Maybe the company, passed from owner to owner to owner, and it's very hard to track down exactly who it is would have the money that would be able to pay to clean this stuff up. Superfund, I think of as the backstop for the worst of the worst cases that you can imagine in this country. And the idea is that the government created a big bank account that put in a whole bunch of money, and that as these project sites, polluted sites, got put on the Superfund list, which is managed by the EPA, the federal government would come in and help pay to clean these things up so they don't hurt anybody else. Superfund, kind of the worst of the worst situation, basically. And when we talk about Superfund, it's not like me going out in the backyard and pouring out a bottle of Windex. These are usually sites that are contaminated by the very worst chemicals you can think of, such as dioxin, benzene. These are things that have been known to cause cancer, cause birth defects in children. There are nearly 1,300 sites, as I understand it, that are current and active on the Superfund list today. Once it becomes on the Superfund list, you can it still stays there, but I think it goes into some sort of inactive status once it's been cleaned up. And a lot of sites have been cleaned up. I think there are 62 still waiting on the proposed list right now. There are always new sites being added. And of course, one of the things to keep in mind with Superfund is that if you have a Superfund site in your community or something you think is worthy of the Superfund list, uh, it can take a long time, I think, to get on the Superfund list, and that's because there's a whole lot of investigation and vetting and paperwork that has to be filled out with the EPA and other environmental authorities, because the government wants to make sure, A, that these really are very, very bad chemicals, and B, if they can find the people who actually did this and make them pay, well, we'd probably all kind of like to punish those people and make them pay instead of the taxpayers having to pay for it. So there's a long sort of investigatory and checking out process that goes into Superfund. Now, there's not a whole lot good about having a Superfund site in your community. You probably, if you have driven past one or it's in your neighborhood, it might be roped off, fenced off, and there might be special signs around it to say this is a Superfund site. And it's disturbing to know that there are a lot of yucky chemicals down, usually in the ground or seeping into the groundwater or coming out in the air near your house. The one good thing there is about Superfund is that there is a whole lot of information out there that's easily available to you and me about Superfund sites on the EPA's website. You remember I talked about how long the sort of vetting process and difficult that can be to get a site on the Superfund list. Well, the good part about that is there's a whole big paper trail that's created by that process, and the EPA now has a whole lot of information that you can find on their website about Superfund sites. For example, if you go to their website, epa.gov Superfund, you can find out a lot of very useful information. For example, they have accountings of what kind of dangerous chemicals are there, what kind of harmful effects those chemicals can have. There's usually a narrative history that tells you a little bit about probably who put that stuff there, who left it there, who's at fault, that kind of thing. That's very useful.